Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing 1, 2, 3. This is tape number 3, Doolittle's Raiders. I'm going to start with Father Glynn here. I suppose my first question would be, were you surprised to see Americans at your doorstep?
Absolutely. I was flabbergasted. I had just finished my Mass and was walking up and down saying some prayers when in walked 5 foreigners. They weren't Chinese, and I asked them, "Where did you come from?" And they pointed to the sky, and they said, "Up there." And I was happy to see them. And one of them was near my hometown. His name is Knobloch. He'll be talking to you one of these times. And we had a whole week together, and we played cards.
And we ate.
We ate.
And we drank that good Chinese wine.
And we went even to a Chinese banquet with General Lee.
Yeah.
Norby, did you ever expect to run into anybody that could speak English?
Not really, because I remember the first village I went into after the morning after bailing out. And I walked in, there was a crowd of people. McElroy and I were together. He was the pilot, I was the co-pilot on the airplane. And Mac says, "I'll take your gun and my gun, and I'll stay out here and protect you. You go into that village and find out where we are." So I walked into the village, and he stayed outside. I said, "Anyone here speak English?" And I said this 2 or 3 times and never got an answer. A lot of Chinese talk, of course. And then finally I heard a voice saying, "I speak English." And I looked around and I heard the voice again, "I speak English." I heard this 3 or 4 times, and then I finally found the guy, because it was a big crowd of people. And that's all he knew. Those
I
3
speak
words,
English.
"I speak English." He didn't know any other word. So it was quite a surprise to find Father Glynn and to have the hospitality and the safety that he extended to us there, because the Japanese, of course, were looking for us. And it wasn't it in Po Young Lake that those 2 fellows, 2 of the crew members were drowned?
Yes, right. They came down and got tangled up in their parachutes and they drowned, right.
Yeah.
Of course, the other 3 weren't they? They were captured?
The other 3 were captured.
Yes.
And they were close to where we came down. And
Did they eventually get executed, or?
well, I'd have to look at the crew list again, because I've forgotten the.
I know there's some executions of one of the crews.
There were 8 people that were captured, and of those 8, 3 were executed, and 1 died in prison camp, and then 4 came home. And of course, one of the ones that came back was Chase Nielsen, who's here with us.
Yes, right.
Chase.
Yeah.
How long had you been in China, Father?
I came over in August of '39 and went to Peking to study the language for 9 months, and then the following September of 1940 I came to my mission in Ingtang. It's the town of the buzzards is what it's called. And we had a mission compound there, a church and a foreign house and a school, and mostly orphan children and VAs, old people we took care of there, and in Ingtang. And so when these guys came in that morning, it was a rare treat and surprise. I was glad to see them, especially when they were from my hometown, some of them.
But there were other crew members that came through there too, weren't there, later on behind us? Or
Well, then they had all the Doolittle flyers came in later.
They all came through.
Yeah. The first group I had, it was about a week after you left. You were there about a week, and about 8 days after, Doolittle and his group came in. And I had breakfast for him that time. And we had the bishop down there and 6 of the priests and all the Chinese officials. And the idea was we had them ready to stay overnight, but Doolittle was a little anxious to get out, so we got buses, and they went then on their last journey to Kunming.
Charcoal burning buses.
Oh yeah, charcoal burning, right.
How fast did they run?
Oh, I guess 30, 35 miles an hour, maybe top speed. Downhill you could go 50. You had no brakes.
Charcoal tank on the back, and
Yeah.
it generated the gas, and that's what they burned.
That's right.
Yeah.
Lucky to have that in those days. It was nothing. And the road.
You wonder why maybe that might not be a way of running vehicles today.
Yeah.
with the energy crisis.
Oh, I have many interesting stories about that, riding those buses. And we had one time I had a bus and it was gasoline lit, and we broke the gasoline feed into the carburetor. Some bus that we had nothing to fix it with. So the guy said, "Don't worry." And he went out to the field and got a bamboo pole about a little bigger than one's thumb, and he slid it down the middle, and he took it and he took the gasoline tank from the bus and put it up on top of the hood and let it drip down into the carburetor. We went the next 300 miles that way. You could have blown up, but we didn't know.
It ran.
Yeah, it ran. But they have very, very ingenious that way in doing things.
Did you, Norby, did you think to the Chinese people you were a curiosity?
Yes, we definitely were a curiosity. They, I don't know, you probably experienced this many times.
Many
over
times,
there.
yeah.
In the countryside, they'd come up and feel of your skin, sort of the color, I guess.
No, the hair.
The hair?
Hair.
Also
See,
the hair?
they're most of them hairless. They don't have much hair. That's funny. It's funny when you got hair on your arm and that. And they don't have it. And that's why the elderly people, the old men especially, they'll have one hair on their chin growing and they nurse for maybe a foot, 2 foot long, and that's precious to them. You know, that's a sign of old age and wisdom. If you got
Another thing I remember, it was the first day I was still out in the boondocks, out in the sticks. I had to go to the toilet, and it was so hard to get alone away from the Chinese, because wherever you went, they were watching you, and they wanted to look at your clothes, and I had my goggles and camera and cigarette lighter that worked still, and this intrigued them very much. But finally, I couldn't wait any longer, and I went out and I went to the toilet. But I had about 15 or 20 people standing there watching me, and it was very interesting.
Well, to them that's common because they have outside no covering around. And it's natural. They wouldn't turn their head twice to look.
No, it didn't bother them, but it bothered me.
Yes,
I wasn't used to that.
Because the men
especially
there,
strangers.
they strip and go into the pool to bathe. Now, one thing though about the Chinese is the women are very, very modest. They will never do anything except in the confines of their home. And they have so strange customs. For instance, a wife cannot walk with her husband to town. She has to walk 10 or 20 feet behind. If she did it, the villagers would stone her. I never could find out the real custom. Another thing, I have never seen Chinese kiss under any circumstance except the mother kissing her little baby. But even when the child gets 5 or 6 years old, there's no more kissing. I remember one time I had an incident. I walked into this house and I was making census, Catholic census, and I was asking this girl where her husband was, and he was a carpenter. And they go off 4 or 5 years to a big town to make money because it's only going to get the money. And it so happened by coincidence, he walked in while I was making the census, and I said, "Oh, you're back again." And nonchalantly and stoically sat down. She brought him over a cup of tea, didn't flash an eye, didn't do nothing, and I was flabbergasted. So I said to him, I said, "This custom I don't quite understand. Here in America, a little more affectionate. This is your wife." And yeah, she's my shifu. Well, how come? He said, "Well, that's the way they are." I said, "Well, is that the one?" Oh, he says, "Well, tonight, what's up?"
Hey, was it at your mission that I was taking a bath that day in the tub in the air raid?
Yeah, I remember that incident. Yeah.
And,
you grabbed a towel, didn't you?
no, I stayed in the bathtub because I figured it was just as safe in there as it was getting out in the fields and hiding someplace. If you're going to get strafed or a bomb's going to be dropped on you, there you are. So you're just as safe sitting in the bathtub.
Right. You know, I heard that when...
That's so you can spell my name.
Okay.
The Doolittle crowd came down in the plane. They had the Zeros flying around and bombing by the plane, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And none of the flyers got out. And the Chinese all scattered went out. And so the soldiers that were with them said, "Well, why don't you leave?" He said, "Why? It gets you here or get you there. Why not just sit here?" He says, "If they're aiming for this place, they'll never hit it." Yeah.
Did the after the the raiders left, did the Japanese eventually get into your area?
Yeah, they sure do. The raiders are there. First group came to me 36 years ago today, April 28th. And then Doodle came on the first week in May. And they had took about 2 weeks for that. They came in 3 groups. The last 2 groups that left from the station right to buses and left. They wouldn't even bring them to my compound. They were afraid of that delay. So I brought the guys sandwiches and coffee, cigarettes, so they had something on the last trip. And we had a Russian lady who was married to a Chinese general, and she was for everlasting bugging me and asking me questions, and I always played dumb. I didn't know anything. Well, as a matter of fact, I didn't know anything, because even the flyers said only could give their rank and serial number, and to me either. They never told me. I didn't even know until I got home later read in the papers later what the name of the aircraft that they took off of, or how they took off, and there were no circumstances, so they kept their secret. And anyhow, what were we talking about? I just digressed the question.
Well, the question was, did the Japanese bother you after we'd been through there?
Well, then that 1st of June is when they came in down from the capital of Jiangxi down to our place. It was about 90 miles away. And I got, 3 days before that, I got sick. I got malaria, and I also got dysentery, and I was running a high fever. I don't know what. I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I had no medicine, and I thought, there's no use staying here. So something possessed me to get up, and I saddled my Mongolian pony and took out the back gate and went 13 miles to the bishop's quarters, where we had medicine and everything taken care of. Well, that same identical morning at 6 o'clock, they came in, and they were looking for little Lin Shenfu. That's Father Glynn in Chinese. And it was Sa Lin Shenfu, killed him. Now, my boy, my Chinese boy we have there that takes care of the priest, didn't know where I was. Nobody knew where I was, but they beat him up, kept beating him, but he couldn't tell them. And when I was only that same day later on, a runner had come down from our mission and told us that the Japanese had taken over Ingtang, and they were on their way to our place in Yukiang, where the bishop was. So we had to pack the orphans and the old people and bring them out to the hills 50 miles away.
But they also killed a lot of the Chinese, didn't they?
Yes. Oh, they killed a lot, and they also destroyed all their rice crop and all their cattle.
Just because they had provided assistance
right.
for the Doolittle people that were going
through
the countryside.
They punished all of them.
Punished everybody. Yeah.
Yes. And we left behind at the bishop's place an Italian priest, because Italy and Japan, you see, were in war together with Hitler, so we thought he'd be safe. And we had some real old people there, and orphans, young orphans, 4 or 5 year old ones that we didn't could bring out the hills and be good for them. And it looked like a sure thing. And it was. We got reports of people that knew about it. They stayed till the 15th of August. That they were doing, but when we got back, when they left, they slaughtered every one of them, and they threw them into a pond. And I don't know what, unless you use some kind of lime in the pond, because we found one little grave of the little babies, the 4 or 5 year olds, and it was all so with lime, and all that was left was the skeleton. The clothes had eaten away, and the hair was eaten. But they had a big pond that they threw the priest was in there, and I found his helmet, but the only way I could distinguish between a female or a male was that the hair was longer for the female. They had very long hair, and it was near the body, but it was all separated. Just the body, and the bones were real white. So I guess it was some kind of a lion domestic one after they killed him. I think they shot him and threw him in. It didn't look like we were beheaded or anything. At least I couldn't tell. And that was a very sorry sight to see, I had the bishop with him, and he took him 3 weeks to get over it. He was so sick of it. So then I went back to my mission in Ingtang and found the church was destroyed and the priest's house was burnt and gutted. But they had left all the buildings along the street we used for school. So I took out one of those rooms and started living in there. In fact, when I got there, they were all messed up and rotten up. So I lived in an old pigsty I had, because I had built it a long time ago, and I had good rock in it, and I could wash that real clean, and I put a little roof over it, and I slept in there for the first 3 nights, so I got something to live in. Yeah. We had some rare experiences.
When you, Norb, after you left Tokyo, did you ever think you'd find an airfield to land on?
Well, we were supposed to have a field to go into at
Nusan.
Nanchang.
No, Nusan is Jade Mountain.
Wait.
I'd say it was.
I'm not sure on the
Nanchang.
spelling or the
Yeah.
pronunciation. No, not Nanchang. It was Po Young. Po Young.
No, Poyang is where you landed.
Oh, that's all right. That's the lake. All right.
No, the airfield I know because we were building it for 6 months before you came, and I had sent down a boy down there. I had
all
trained
right.
out of
Okay.
It's
That's
called
right.
Nusan.
Was that the name of the
Yeah,
field?
yeah.
Okay.
It's Jade Mountain. is
What was the name of the town near there?
That's it. That's the town.
Oh, all
Well,
right.
the province was Jiangxi. It's in the province
Okay.
of Jiangxi.
All right. Well, you remember better than I do, and in fact, I can't vouch for anything anymore because
Yeah.
my memory is getting so bad as I get older. But there was an airfield that we were supposed to go to. However, because of the bad weather and the lack of radio aids to lead us in, we just couldn't make it. Ran out of fuel.
Well, Doolittle told me, I asked him, I was told that the commander made a blunder, but he said no. He
Yeah.
said they had a beacon ship, an airplane that was supposed to be there and to guide them, and that ship in the storm had crashed.
Well,
So they never made
yeah,
it.
that's
Therefore,
one of
when
the
they got-
stories, and the other one was that the Navy was supposed to have moved in a radio beacon, and besides having 50-gallon drums of fuel along the runway, if we came in at night, they were going to light the oil in these fuel drums so we'd have a landing path to come in at. They were also supposed to have this radio beacon, but there was a mistake on the date, and they were expecting us the day after we arrived. We got off early. We got off in the morning instead of late afternoon takeoff. So
Did you ever parachuted before?
no.
Can you remember way back what you thought as you bailed out?
Yeah, my first thought was the shock of the parachute opening. I thought, oh my God, the parachute is caught in the empennage of the airplane. I thought this will be the end of me, but then the airplane disappeared into the clouds, and I was floating very freely. And then I broke out of the clouds. It was raining, and I saw
Terrific wind, too, wasn't it?
yeah, it was bad weather.
Very good, yeah.
Saw what appeared to be a highway down below me. I later found out it was a river, and my first thought, and I was still floating down, I was hungry, was that, here's a highway. I can walk a few miles and find a hamburger stand, and that's how much I knew about China.
Yeah.
But, of course, I didn't find any hamburger stands, but got down all right, landed in rice paddy.
Now, after you left China, then where did you go?
Well, from China went into India and then stayed in India for a year and a half and flew 50-some more missions, 55, 57 missions.
When did you ever meet Father Glynn again?
About 1949,
9.
8 or 9, yeah.
Yeah. I come back 48.
Because my father was in
Fort Sheridan.
Fort Sheridan, Illinois.
I had his married sister in Waukegan,
Yeah,
and we got together then.
yeah.
How about the rest of your crew?
Well, all 5 of us are still living. Campbell is up in,
Utah, isn't it? No, that's
well, he's somewhere in the Northwest, retired now. He was a navigator. McElroy, the pilot, is in Lubbock, Texas. And Bourgeois is down in New Orleans.
that's right.
He retired. He stayed in the service for 30 years. The other 2 had gotten out. McElroy got out. Campbell got out. And Adam Williams got out. He was the engineer gunner, and he lives in South Carolina.
Now, what position were you when you took off?
13,
You were 13.
number
Lucky,
13.
Lucky 13.
Lucky 13.
Yeah, very lucky.
That's been my lucky number ever since. Ever since that takeoff.
Yeah. That night, incidentally, in my experience in China, And the 9 years was the worst in that province of John C. that we ever had of a storm. In fact, there was a hurricane on the coast, and we got the backlash of it. That's what we got. But it was terrific.
Yeah,
The high wind and the rain. It was a
Rain
torrential
was-
rain.
Yeah.
We never.
Okay.
I don't recall a rain like that. And it was in April, and our area there in April is usually real spring weather. Nice weather. We get rains, but not like that. And I was very surprised at the storm myself. That night I heard the planes above. We got the air alert. But I thought to myself, why go out in that rain? I must have stayed home too. I said,
I kept seeing anything.
the Japanese have been bombing for, I got there in 40, and this was 41, for 2 years. Every morning at 8:30, you could set your clock, and they used our church steeple as a rendezvous. They made us 2 circles, and then the end of the second circle, they made a beeline, a direct line for the railroad station, which they aimed to hit and never did. They hit the town or they hit around it, but they never hit. And they do this every day. 4 planes, 8:30 would come. So with that in mind, I said, well, there's no use worrying about hitting the
Not
house.
trying to hit you,
But it was the first night raid we ever had, and alert. We didn't know who it was. I found out later that this calculating that was the Doolittle Flyers up there, buzzing around and floating around.
trying to find a place to land.
Yeah.
What was the weather like, or the flight from Tokyo? Was it rough flying, or?
Oh, well, it was a beautiful day over Tokyo. We took off. The weather was very rough on takeoff from the Hornet. But then it got better and better as we approached Japan, and then it was good. Beautiful day over Japan. And then as we left Japan and headed south and then west again over the Yellow Sea, why it gradually deteriorated. Mm-hmm. And most of the people pulled up into the clouds and went on instruments and flew for I guess another 5 or 6 hours across there till we ran out of gas.
Did you know you were over land when you?
We were sure we should have been by dead reckoning, by our speed and the distance that we had to cover. We should have been over land.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we landed on land, although
You were actually about 80 to 90 miles from the field then, when you landed.
several of us, the people that landed in the lake, I guess, thought, well, we haven't reached we haven't reached land. They probably thought it was ocean.
Yeah.
Was that a deep lake or a shallow lake?
Oh, no,
No, it's a big-
Lake Poyang. It's a big lake.
Big lake.
It's a huge lake, yeah. Very good.
Well, I guess if you have any comments, anything else you want to say for the tape, like I say, I'm sending this into the editors, and
Yeah.
what they do with it is
Well,
it's up to them.
after that,
Well, I'm a Legionnaire. You can tell them that.
also, I'll make duplicates of all these tapes to go to your archives.
after that hassle with the Japs, what happened to the Japs when they were there from June 1st until August the 15th, what they used to eat is fresh pork that they killed. They ruined all the crops, burned them down, they killed all the chickens and all animals that they could see. But from eating this fresh pork, they got dysentery, and they had to make a run for it. They go back to Japan. The whole army went down, and they really
that
did.
right? They know that?
Absolutely, I found it out from the Chinese generals. Why
this-
they got out so quick?
The secret weapon, huh?
Yeah, the secret weapon.
They were all sick.
Yeah, they had to make a run for it.
Oh, okay.
And later on, I got infection of the liver for somewhere or another. We had a rough going there, and the bishop decided to send me to Kunming to get an X-ray. And while I was there, he said, "By the way, the bishop in Washington is wanting some of our men to help out the American chaplains who are shorthanded in China." So 2 of us joined up, and I was in the Air Force then for a year and a half. It was a beautiful experience.
You were.
Then I went back to my mission until 48, and since I had that year and a half vacation, the bishop called it, he said, stay an extra year. And then in 48, I went back. But at that time, when I left Shanghai on August about 4th, Peking had fallen. But they stopped. They didn't go, and it took them another 9 or 10 months before they went to Nanjing. They got the capital. I don't know, 2 years maybe. But we were not allowed to go back because Americans wouldn't give me a visa. So That was the end of my Chinese tour.
Yeah, let's see.